Hello all, welcome. Thanks for joining us today, live from COP22. We're really excited to welcome you, Maurice, Manikam and Maya. Thanks for joining us live from COP22. Hopefully we're going to get away with the call without any technical hitches today, but just be patient with us if we do experience any technical hitches because we're broadcasting live from Marrakesh. Thanks. So today, the general outline of the call in terms of time, both Tim and Michael are going to present for about 20 minutes each, back to back, and then we're going to have about 20 minutes at the end of the call for questions and answers and a bit more of open discussion. So I hope that suits everyone. Once we get to the end of the call, I can explain the protocol for asking questions. However, if there's just a few of us on the call, then that's made easier. So thanks. If you have any technical issues throughout the call, then just let me know in either the chat, ideally the chat box, and then I can do my best to help you. Thanks. And the chat box is on the right-hand side of your screen. It should be, and you can direct a question towards me. So now I'm just going to introduce Michael and Tim's going to be the first person to speak today. So Michael Farrelly currently serves as Program Manager at Tanzania Organic Agriculture Movement. With 14 years experience of development work across Africa, from building village water supplies to promoting ecological agriculture, he has designed several climate change adaptation projects. The acclaimed Chololo Ecovillage project brought together 7 diverse organizations to create a model of good practice in climate change adaptation in dryland Africa, integrating agriculture, livestock, water, energy, forestry in the quest for community resilience. That's Michael, and he's going to be speaking in about 20 minutes. And Tim Clarke is a former EU ambassador to Tanzania and the African Union, now serving as GEN ambassador and GEN's representative to in the European Network for Community-Led Initiatives on Climate Change and Sustainability, otherwise known as ECOLISE. Through 3 decades of working a variety of positions for European institutions, he developed a passion for a range of issues, including community-led development, the fight against injustice and inequality, and the dignity of the most vulnerable, for women's, girls, and children's rights, for environmental conservation, for mitigation of the impact of climate change, for food security, culture and intercultural dialogue, for good governance and democracy building, and for eco-innovation and eco-development. Having left a tangible legacy in these areas, Tim now devotes himself pro bono to these issues. So with no further ado, we're very excited today to start off with Tim Clarke, and I will pass over to Tim. Thank you.
Very much, Tom. It's very nice to speak to you all tonight from this Riyadh local hotel in Marrakesh, where the COP22 is taking place. I thought I'd start with a little story which explains how I got to sitting where I am this moment. I've been working in Tanzania for some time, and I was in a rural village. And as I was walking through the village, I suddenly thought, this isn't right. The people who are living here, the poorest of the poor, the vulnerable, the fragile, they haven't received any of this development cooperation or government interest that they should have done, because they've got no healthcare, no education services, they've got no infrastructure. And it was a sort of wake-up call. It's what I called my Martin Luther King dream moment, when I suddenly thought, I've been spending so much of my time working on development issues in Africa, one of my real passions. So here I was in a typical African village, and after all, 80% of the population of Africa lives in such villages. Here I was, and all the energy that had been mobilized to try to support these village communities, well, what was there to show for it? And it made me go back to and rethink my beginnings as an ecologist at university. And the two iconic figures that I really inspired me and have continued to inspire me through most of my life. The first is Rachel Carson, the author of Silent Spring, that was a massive wake-up call to the American administration and led to the institution of the Environment Protection Agency. And then there was Fritz Schumacher, an economist who wrote a seminal book in 1973, Small is Beautiful, and a development study as if people mattered. Now, people don't think very often about as if people mattered. They remember the title, Small is Beautiful. My sense is that people aren't, as they should do, really thinking about how people are ultimately affected by their development activities. And I went back, it made me turn over my mind as I was walking through this village, all the history of development, cooperation, of the original work done, of the North-South dialogue, of the Brandt Commission, of Brundtland. In the environmental field, the first conference in Stockholm in 1972, then Rio, the Earth Summit in 1992, when I was privileged to be present. Then onwards through Rio +20 and the various COPs, until now we are today at COP22. Today, when most of the ministers of the COP government representatives have been working on the issue of finance. And when I was in my car, going back to the capital Dar es Salaam, thinking through all this, I suddenly thought, well, this is wrong. What we need is to rethink the way in which we work together with rural communities. And maybe we should think about communities as the true drivers of the development process. And it led me, with other colleagues in the European office, to come up with a concept called an eco-village concept, which was to make communities really at the heart of their own development, to give them pride, respect, dignity, to make them the true drivers of the process. And we chose 3 areas where this would take place. One was a very dry community, arid. Another, a forested area, which is subject to deforestation. Another, a coastal area. 3 places in Tanzania. One at a place called, ultimately we chose the people who won the bid, a small village called Chololo, near the capital Dodoma, for the arid area. Then a place called Morogoro, mountainous area, subject to a lot of erosion. And then a place in Pemba, a coastal area. And we thought this would be a new way of trying to see how we could reach people and give people hope. Because many of the communities that I'm talking about live off handouts. And they live in areas where desertification has taken root, and there are very few prospects for such people. And the notion behind this eco-village approach was to reverse that process, to make the village communities the heart of the process, to make them appropriate their own development. In the case of one of the projects, one of the closest to my heart, Chololo, which you'll hear a bit more about from one of the current project managers in a minute, Michael Farrelly. In one of those communities, over 20 different innovations were introduced in the area of agriculture, livestock, water, energy. And to cut a long story short, the project is still ongoing. It has totally revolutionized the way in which these villages see their future. And indeed, it's been so successful that other villages in the region and other nations are now talking about this program. And as I was reaching the end of my working life with the European institutions, I thought, oh, this isn't bad, is it? This is a way where we can actually make a difference. And I started looking around, and I found that, of course, I wasn't the first person to think of eco-villages, but what was happening in other parts of Africa was truly stunning. In fact, I came across an extraordinary experiment, which has now really proved its worth, in Senegal, in Western Africa, where a decision taken by the president at that time, President Wade, in the end of 2008-9, I think, to convert and transform 14,000 villages in Senegal into so-called eco-villages, to give villagers strength, to give them political support, to give them powers over their own destiny. This was a truly transformational decision that the president took. And now, today, something like 500 so-called eco-villages have been developed. And I discovered as I looked around that, in fact, these little initiatives, it's popping up all over the place. And in fact, there was one organization, an organization called the Global Ecovillage Network, that was driving that process, with thousands of communities around the world joining our hands as a global network to promote eco-village life. And here I come back to why I'm in COP22 today. It's been a remarkable meeting so far. It started a week ago. And following from a discussion we had at one of the pillars of the eco-village community, a project called SECEM in Egypt, which was started over 30 years ago. We had a meeting there in April, and we thought this is something very exciting. We can make something truly transformational. What we can do is produce a Pan-African eco-village development plan. Can we really try and roll across Africa a program which will transform and transition village communities right the way across the continent, so that the rural population, the majority of the population in Africa, can actually have a control over their own destiny? And here in COP22, we've had some stunning success stories. I mean, it's very hard. I've been in many conferences in my life, and just to see where we've come from in 1 year. I was privileged to be at the COP21 when the Paris Treaty was agreed. Now there, I think it's 109 signatories or ratifications of the treaty. But I mean, what is so exciting is that what we've been explaining to other stakeholders, governments, other institutions, there's a genuine excitement in the air that this type of approach to give rural people, rural villages, the means to actually run their own development, this is transformational. And we've had discussions with the Environment Minister for Mauritania, the Environment Minister for the Gambia, the Environment Minister for Ethiopia, the Environment Minister for Sierra Leone. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. And we had a discussion just only this morning with the director of something called the Great Green Wall Initiative across the whole of the Sahel, which regroups 11 states. And there was really excitement. And we are in the process, Jen is in the process of trying to sign up some sort of partnership agreement. But this is truly transformational. And when I go back to my walking in this little village in rural Tanzania 3 years ago, and I think, wow, this is quite extraordinary. Here, I'm not alone. There are plenty of people around who also think that they can make a difference. They also think that if we bring together villages throughout the world into a global network that are working towards a common aim, with common values, a holistic vision, which involves social issues, cultural issues, economic issues, creativity, things which will provide for these communities life. I think we will have done very well. This is, of course, only the start of the process. And as I said, the finance ministers were meeting today, and who knows what will be discussed. I think probably in this particular COP, nothing very much will be formally integrated into the system to make a major change. They're mainly discussing today issues related to process rather than actual real changes. But nevertheless, the the presentations we've made, these sort of webinars, the visibility we've had, the partnerships we've been trying to develop with other civil society organizations, this is something which is going to last. And we really feel that we're at a turning point within the GEN network where we can actually really make a big difference and contribute to the well-being of communities across the world. One of the extraordinary things really about being part of that community is the understanding that we are part of a global process and we are all part of the solution. And if we change our behavior, if we don't drive onwards and onwards, business as usual, to a sort of existence where no one can control what we're doing, then, you know, the prospects are bad. But today I was sharing a platform with experiences in Cameroon, experience in the Democratic Republic of Congo, experience in Senegal. There's a genuine feel that we're on a path which is going to take us into a different type of world, and where maybe people working together, understanding each other, sharing knowledge, sharing information, they will really make a big contribution to the future for our generations. So at this point, I will stop my presentation here, and I'll hand the webinar back to Tom and pass to Michael, who will tell us more about the eco-village he's dealing with in Tanzania and gender issues.
Well, thank you, Tim. That was incredibly moving and very insightful conversation and presentation there of everything that's been happening here at COP in Marrakesh. And, you know, even the beginnings, just the initial first small steps of the Ecovillage development program across Africa. We're very excited to be moving forward with this, and maybe we'll open up for questions from the participants about that at the end. Thank you, Tim. So now we're going to begin with Michael Farrelly, who currently serves as the program manager at Tanzania Organic Agriculture Movement. I believe that Michael's got a presentation that he's also going to show, so we'll just get that up now. Just bear with us.
Okay, hi, yeah, so I'm Michael Farrelly from Tanzania Organic Agriculture Movement, and here at the COP22 in Marrakesh as part of the GEN delegation, the Global Environment Ecovillage Network. So I've got a presentation, a few slides to show you about Ecovillage adaptation in Tanzania, and particularly about some work we've been doing to put women at the forefront of the transformation. This is a farmer from Chololo Ecovillage, and she was one of the first early adopters to jump at the opportunity to take up a range of innovative technologies and methods and practices. Here you can see she's intercropping, that's cowpeas in the middle, in amongst her Massia sorghum. It's a drought-resistant, early maturing variety of sorghum, which is one of the staple crops there, and intercropping them with cowpeas, which is a legume, which takes nitrogen out of the atmosphere and puts it into the root area. Also it has other benefits. So from this field, for example, she gets 3 crops. She gets the grain from the sorghum. She gets green leaves from the legumes, from the cowpeas, which she can cook up for her children, and she gets the beans. You can see those kind of string beans, which she can dry and save for a good source of protein. Also, the ground cover provided by those leaves reduces the temperature of the soil, reduces evapotranspiration, and generally, from a point of view of climate resilience, it reduces the risk. So this is an area of highly vulnerable to climate change, particularly to drought. So if it all went really badly wrong, then if one crop failed, then there's a chance that she could harvest the other crop. So this is a bit of an overview of the project. It's in Dodoma, the center of Tanzania, semi-arid area, roughly 5,000 farmers, extremely vulnerable to climate change. And our job was to create a model of good practice in climate change adaptation. So, Tanzania, down on the east of Africa, on the Indian Ocean side, below Kenya, and we're bang in the middle. The challenges, as you can see, we're here in Marrakesh with the COP, people talking about it, climate change talks, and I think a lot of people think that climate change is something that might happen at some point in the future, by 2050, depending on some scenario or other. Well, the reality in Tanzania is that it's happening now. It's been there for quite a long time. It's been there for a number of years, and people are feeling. You ask them in their villages, what do you understand by climate change? And this is what they told us: drought, less rain, less predictable rain, crop losses, food shortages, hunger, loss of income, land degradation. Flooding, instead of having a regular rain, it's more like events of high downpours, which take the topsoil away, and so on. Women are at the forefront of this. They're often the first to feel the impact of climate change. If you think about it, in these communities, women, it's women's responsibility to collect firewood. Almost all households use firewood for cooking, and right now it's a 5-hour round trip for a woman to go and get firewood. It's women's job to collect the water. So they've got to go wherever the water is and get it. So women women and children tend to suffer the effects first. Also, actually, there's an interesting statistic in the villages that we have about 1,000 missing men. If you compare, it should be about 50-50. And what happens is that when there's a drought, when there's an emergency, when there's famine, when there's hunger, then it's usually the men, often the young men, that leave the village and go in search of work, in search of income, in search of food, and quite often they don't come back. Moving on. So yeah, droughts are more frequent. These women, as I say, they walk 5 hours round trip to collect firewood. Okay. Okay, so that's a typical house made out of mud. So it's a very simple. These are some of the poorest people in Tanzania, and some of the most drought vulnerable. Land degradation creates conflict between pastoralists and farmers, and between people in the same village. Some who have land, some who have crops. The animals tend to eat. People don't have fences. There's very little fences. You can see a little bit of a fence in the foreground there, but it's broken down. So land degradation. So what we set out to do, funded by the European Union, and the program that Tim put together with his EU colleagues, was we put together a partnership of 6 partner organizations, including one from academia, a higher learning institute, a government agricultural research institute, a local authority, and 3 NGOs, forestry, water, and organic agriculture. And basically set about supporting the community to test, evaluate, and take up 25 technologies across agriculture, livestock, water, energy, and forestry. So typically, some of the things we did were around agriculture. Improved seeds was very important. Seeds, open pollinated varieties of drought-resistant seeds, and good agricultural practices. People before maybe have been broadcasting seeds, so to get them, planting them in with accurate spacing. Genetic improvement of the livestock by the introduction of higher performing breeds. Rainwater harvesting. We converted the entire water supply to the village to be driven by solar power. Energy saving stoves, biogas, and a lot of tree planting. I mean, I could tell you about that, but I'm not really going to. What I want to tell you about is how we put women at the forefront. We empowered women to act at the forefront of transformation. And we did it by fairly simple 5-step process. Firstly, to identify all the income opportunities that were available. Secondly, to select those most beneficial to women out of all the things that they could possibly do in the village. Thirdly, to identify the constraints and opportunities of those selected income generating activities. And fourthly, to address the constraints and exploit and develop the opportunities. In more detail, so we listed all the money-making activities, about 25 of them or something. And then we applied in village workshops, I think 190 people in 3 workshops, about 105 of them female, and over a couple of days. And we applied 5 criteria. We asked them to sort of score each of the income generating activities against these 5 criteria. Is there a market? Two criteria for the economics of it. Is there a market for this stuff? And is there more demand than supply? And then 3 for the gender aspect of it, 3 criteria. So number 1, can women do it? Number 2, do women like doing it? And 3, probably most important, can women keep the money from this activity? So participatory workshops, you can see the list of, in Swahili there, the list of all the activities, and going through that process of scoring and ranking. So what we found out of those workshops was that local chicken came up number 1, dairy cattle number 2, pigs 3, goats 4, and then it started getting into. So the first 4 you can see are all livestock. You can see that's where the money is. So interesting kind of facts emerged. We probed. Okay, tell us about pigs? And they said, oh, the women said, we like pigs. We enjoy working with pigs, but when we sell a pig, the money is so big that it has to go into the man's pocket. That's what they told us. So anyway, so we focused on chicken and goats. They had it was quite widespread uptake of chicken and goat keeping. So that's the focus. So that's the first kind of step, was to select the first and second step, to select the income generating activities of most benefit to women. Then participatory analysis. I mean, that's kind of a posh term for trying to work out how this stuff works. How does the business of keeping chickens work? What are the challenges and opportunities? So the challenges might be, they get diseases and die. They don't have enough food. Predators come and take them away. What are the opportunities? Okay, well, we get bran from the mill, where we mill the grain, and that's a kind of a byproduct. There's not much use for it, but we can put that into the chicken feed. Somebody in the district council knows how to do vaccinations, so build up these opportunities, and then we designed a program to address those challenges and to exploit those opportunities. So some of the things we did was introduce improved male goat bucks and male chickens, cockerels, to increase the genetic potential of the local livestock breeds. What we found was that the F1s, the second generation, or the first new generation coming off that breeding process, got to maturity in half the time and would sell for twice as much money as before. So basically a four-fold increase in income. We put in place training on how to look after chickens, how to look after goats, how to manage diseases, how to vaccinate, and how to move closer to a sort of a semi-intensive way of keeping chickens, not just having 6 chickens or something, but having maybe 30. So how are we doing for time? Okay. Yeah, so results. We found overall, we did a baseline survey and an end-line survey 2.5 years later, and what we found across the whole village, we had a 64% increase in women's incomes, which is like significantly more than the average, the increase in average household incomes. So we could see that the project as a whole had benefited women proportionately more than the average. Some interesting results in terms of food security. Number of households eating 3 meals a day doubled basically to from about 1/3 to about 2/3 of the households. And the average period of food shortage went down from 7 to 3 months, roughly. That's how people measure kind of food security in these villages. How many months do you not have food in your household? Because the harvest comes in maybe April, something like that. There's only one rainy season from about December to March. And that food that they harvest in March, April has to last through till the next March, April. And drought years, it just doesn't. So lessons, we see that women and children are among the first to feel the impacts of climate change. But as a result, they are often the early adopters. They're often the ones that jump at the opportunity to take up new technologies, practices, and so on. If they can see a direct benefit to themselves, to their families, then they will jump at that opportunity. And finally, empowering women benefits children's well-being, because what we see is that in these communities, it's women that it's the primary responsibility of the women to look after the family, look after the children, look after the health, the education, look after the nutrition, feeding. So if you can empower women, what we hear from women is, now I don't need to beg my husband for money to send the children to school, to buy medicine. Now I can just sell a chicken, go to the dispensary, buy some medicine, end of problem. So that's kind of a snapshot of how we've been working to put women at the forefront of transformation to a resilient and productive and developmental kind of village life. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Michael. Wow, that's fantastic to hear about what's happening on the ground in Tanzania. Really appreciate the presentation. It's very, very informative, and good to get a little bit deeper into what's happening on the ground after Tim talked about what's happening more generally in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa at the moment. So now we're going to open up for questions. We've got about 20 minutes, so it's a good amount of time. I should say at this point, because I didn't mention earlier, that this call is being recorded, and it's going to be put up on our website afterwards, so just so you know. So there's two ways to ask questions. In the right-hand toolbar, there's a raise hand function, which you can put up, and then I can direct questions to Tim and Michael that way. Otherwise, you can write your question in the chat box, and I'll queue those up for Michael and Tim. So it's up to you how you want to ask, but we've got 20 minutes, so go ahead. We look forward to hearing from you.
So, any questions from the floor?
This is Manikam from Sri Lanka. I wanted to ask Tim, I was very inspired by the fact that you're working with stakeholders from the government departments. And in Sri Lanka, like if we are to come to that place, it's going to take quite a time. So I would like to know how do you think that one could from the scratch begin to develop a relationship network like that?
Tim?
Thank you very much, Manikam. Yeah, indeed, it's a very complex issue. I mean, I know in Sri Lanka, it's governance issues are really potentially problematic, and engaging with the local community sometimes is very difficult for governments to do for all sorts of reasons, and vice versa. And indeed, the movement of the global eco-village network was partly inspired, I think, by communities wishing to go away from the government and to manage their own lifestyles in a way which didn't have interference. My sense, however, is that, and the challenge, I think, is that, and I'm seeing this primarily from an African perspective, but of course there's an Asian perspective and a Latin American perspective as well. But my sense is that since people are often feel voiceless and disempowered and do not feel that they can really contribute to their own development, they're left almost with begging bowls, that this step for communities to reach out and try to talk to local authorities and governments is completely necessary. And it needs a lot of mutual understanding. It needs also reconciliation from many people. And the women, in my experience, are often the best at doing this, although they're often reluctant because in countries that not far from where I'm sitting at the very moment, sometimes they're not given perhaps the access that they need. But in general, I think the point you raise is a completely valid and vital one. And when we engage with communities and try to forge links and open up pathways to talk to governments, this is probably the most difficult step. And the next most difficult step is that most of the funding from governments doesn't filter down to local communities. Michael next to me could give plenty of examples where budgets are agreed in the parliament and should be dispersed to local communities and councils, but for one reason or another, it doesn't seem to arrive. So at the end of the day, you can't separate the sort of issues we're talking about now with governance issues. But yeah, it's a complicated issue. I hope I've given you some elements of a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tim. And can I ask one more question from Michael?
Sure.
Yeah. Michael, I've through your presentation, I saw you have a lot of. You have gone really into detail about how to implement and do the studies and everything, but from my point of view, like, we lack all those knowledge and experience. And how do you think this can go to this could be shared with other like region like Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, and is there already a thing existing, or what do you think in the future would happen?
Yeah. What we tried to do in Chololo was to have a test bed. It was an experiment. It was like what we were aiming to do. We threw 25 technologies into a village. We encouraged the community, the farmers, to try them out. And then what we did yes, we put together a team of a multidisciplinary team, because not everybody knows about water, not everybody knows about agriculture. So we had specialists in each of those areas that could take a lead on putting together the best bet technologies, the best, most appropriate technologies, methods, practices, and then towards the end, what we did, once we'd had a couple of years, 2 or 3 seasons of this, we then got the farmers together, or a big group. We had about 80 farmers together, and we asked them, what works? Which one of these 25 technologies? We went through them one by one. Which one is effective? Which ones are effective? Is it effective? Does it work for women? And if so, why? And then finally, perhaps the most important, is it affordable? And we developed a little technology, a little sort of tool to do that, which was, okay, can you take up this activity? A, if you had a grant, so it would be free. B, if you had to take a loan. Or C, can you do it with your own money or your own labor, your own resources? And it became very clear which were the effective ones and which were the affordable ones. Now, and so we came up with like a top 10 smash hits of the best 10 practices. And we realized that those are the ones that you can actually go and roll out in other villages. And maybe you don't have to wait for GEF funds or GCF funds or COP35 to decide who's going to give money to who. If these activities can be carried out with farmers' own labor, with their own resources, with their own money, if they know that, then we've got a huge way forward to be able to share this across a region, across a country, or across several countries that are suffering the similar effects. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think that was a good response, Michael. I just wanted to say that what we definitely don't want to do is to reinvent the wheel. And if you look at the Global Ecovillage Network website, you'll find a solutions library. Now, of course, they don't apply to everyone. Every case is different. They have to be tailor-made. But you'll find that somewhere in the world, someone has had to address a particular problem, whether it's biochar or whether it's renewable energy or permaculture system. There is a solution, actually, to everything. And one of the exciting things about coming to COP is that there's a lot of people running around trying to make networks. And now in this globalized world with internet connections and so on, we keep on. I mean, yesterday I bumped into people working in Asia. There was a presentation from the Center for Ecology in Nepal. And there is lots of people without knowing it who are doing the same things as other groups, but actually they're not part of a global movement. And what the Global Ecovillage Network tries to do is to bring all those experiences together. So we don't have very many resources, but you get the point. I mean, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's try to work together, build on experiences. The whole movement started in Findhorn over 50 years ago with people starting to share their experience, and it's spread across the world. And it's now probably the only organization that really can encapsulate all these different experiences with the idea of sharing knowledge and information.
Just another thought on that was that a lot of this stuff is not rocket science, but it does require farmers or community members to change their behavior. And often we're dealing with communities where traditional practices are, where trying out new things is kind of hard, and you have to kind of, I think there's a body of work, of thought around how to change behavior, and there are, I think it's useful if you're developing projects like this, programs like this, eco-villages, to kind of to think about, well, what are the barriers that these community members have to taking up new practices, and then just keep trying because sooner or later people get it. They do. They see the benefits. If you and peer pressure and kind of, my next door neighbor's got a energy saving stove. Why can't I do that? Because it's going to save me a day out of my week that I could be better spent doing something in the fields or something. So there's traditional beliefs. There's people can come together and think about discuss issues in a group. And somebody might say, oh no, you can't do that, my grandfather said you had to do this. And somebody else in the group might say, that's rubbish, don't, you know, your grandfather was superstitious old so and so. You need to be, you know, moving in the modern world, you know, so people can kind of change their behavior gradually. It's a gradual process, but it can happen.
I have a question.
I wondered about, Michael, what kind of percentage of the money received from the EU was spent on training? Because it does seem to be that there was a lot of training that you had mentioned in various of the documents about Chololo. And from what you're saying now, it also sounds as if a fair whack of time was spent in that area. And I just wondered whether you had any rough idea about what the differentiations were between training and implementation.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hi, Morris. Anyway, I think we've spoken on. We've exchanged emails before now. Good to see that you're sharing this with us this evening.
Yes, I'm alive.
And you're in Gambia, aren't you? Yeah.
Yes. And alive.
Got plenty of its similar problems down there. So I don't think we've done I don't have the figures on a breakdown of training versus. I would say that training versus implementation is not that. The training is a major part of the implementation. In order to kind of develop the project design in the first place, we went to the villages a number of times and worked with them we went through a process called CVCA, Climate Vulnerability and Capacity Analysis, using participatory rural appraisal techniques to kind of understand what were the challenges, by facilitating workshops with members of the community. And we asked them what were the main assets, what were the main challenges, and what had they done in the past to address some of these challenges, to respond to the climate change impacts. And finally, we asked them, what did they want from us? And I was really, I think we were all really kind of surprised, but really pleased when what they said to us was they wanted knowledge. They didn't want tractors or dams, or they wanted knowledge. They wanted to know how to do this stuff, because they knew that the sustainability came from their own resources. So the training became a central core part of the process, and the inputs that come alongside are decreasing as we go along. So for example, seeds. It's quite a major kind of component of the agriculture sector in the village and in the villages. And seeds can be a barrier. They can be expensive for farmers, or farmers might think that they're expensive. What we've done now is we've got farmers to be producing their own seeds. We've got QDS, quality declared seed production, going on in those villages. And this year we had 6 tons of seed grade, certified seed being produced by those farmers in those villages. So on the one hand, it means that those seeds are now available. On the second, also those farmers are generating income from selling seeds at affordable prices to their fellow farmers. So yeah, we're trying to make this stuff work, and the only way it's going to work is if it's knowledge intensive. And we know that agroecology, for example, is like deeply knowledge intensive. It's not a one size fits all kind of approach. People have to understand the interactions between the different parts of their farming systems. So we need to make it knowledge intensive and keep the costs down. That's the way we're going for it.
Thanks.
Hi, well, we've probably got enough time for one more question. I'm aware that we've had 2 questions from 2 males so far. We've got 1 female on the call, Maya. Not to put you on the spot, but if you do have any questions now, this would be the time to speak up. And if not, then maybe we can go to someone else for a quick question before we close the call.
I have a question.
I do have a question, but I will cut it very short. Hi, and first of all, thank you very much. It was very informative. I had actually been in Kibbutz Lotan at the Ecological Center this summer to learn about the eco-villages and everything. So I'm very inspired and planning to move there to do their new eco-village. But my idea is actually about what you're doing, how to help people with eco-villages. And I just wanted to ask, you mentioned, Tim, that now you're at a turning point because the people got their own inspiration and they wanted their own way to go their path. So I just wanted to know, because this is a crucial thing, why I think so many years, once the leaders are out of the projects, it stopped or it didn't work out after that. It wasn't sustainable, let's put it that way. So what made them believe? Because I think the whole thing is about, like, once people believe in and once they have the hope or they could see that they could do it, it happens. So what do you think it changed that make this change? Thank you.
Nice to speak to you. I don't know from where you're calling. Sorry. Repeat again where you're calling from.
I'm actually in Istanbul. I'm calling from Turkey.
I see. Yeah, there's a huge stand from Turkey at the event at COP22. My simple response is that success breeds success, and although people have sometimes a bumpy start, if the community is really driving the process, our experience in the Global Ecovillage Network is that it has real sustainability. But the key so often is to find individuals who are sufficiently motivated. We have some programs which are, very fragile financially. That's a characteristic in many of these programs. Then others have grown and grown and grown and spawned new activities. So the document I referred to, this so-called Pan-African Ecovillage Development Program, which could equally apply to other continents, is simply to try to create inspirational hubs, training, education, knowledge giving, as Michael has said, to create an environment where people can get access to knowledge, can get access to some sort of financial resources, and then run with it. And our experience so far is very, very positive. But we really believe, because the climate change issues are so important now, we need a step change. We need a massive mobilization, actually, to change people's perceptions and to directly act against certain commercial interests which are going the wrong way. So we think empowering communities, changing agricultural practices, and giving people the strength through example to run their own lives. I mentioned the solutions library. I mean, if you want to start with a windmill in your backyard, we have designs that and specialists throughout the world who know how to deal with this. So with everything, you need to have someone to start. It's true. Someone has to have the gem of an idea and then run with it. Maybe you, after your training in your own institute, you'll be the founder of an eco-village yourself.
I'll try to help you. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for being on the call today and joining us. We really appreciate it. Unfortunately, we don't really have any time for additional questions, and I know we could go on talking about this fascinating topic all night, actually, and I know that some of you do have questions, but we're going to have to cut off the call. However, I'm sure that Tim and Michael would be happy for you to get in touch through the website if you did have any specific questions. Also, as I said earlier, this webinar has been recorded and it will be up on the website if you need to reference anything afterwards. We'll put it up as soon as possible. We are at COP, as I said before, and as all you know, and we have one more webinar running this week, tomorrow at the same time, 6 o'clock, by Margarita Zetelius, who is very involved with Gen International, but also with CASA, the South American Ecovillages network. And her webinar is going to be entitled Ecovillages, Peace and Climate Change in Colombia. So if you're interested in that as well, then sign up. That'll be at 6 o'clock tomorrow. In conclusion, thank you again for joining us all today, and we wish you all the best and hope to connect again soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.